authorized to declare a recess, which might happen here any minute, during the hearing without objection. Show that adopted. I also would last unanimous consent for subcommittee to permit those not on the subcommittee to ask questions and be a part of the hearing without objection. Show that ordered. As a reminder, members are wish to insert a document into the record, please also email it to documentsti@mail.house.gov. Before I begin, I want to take a moment just to send my deepest condolences to our colleague, Ms. Peltola, and her entire family, and on the loss of her husband, Buzz Peltola Jr. And we're just saddened by that, yet we reach out to them. We hope that they'll have comfort in being together and having the time together. So I recognize the ranking member, Mr. Larson, for remarks that he would like to provide for Ms. Peltola.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I also want to extend condolences to Mary and her family on the loss of Buzzy, and had a chance to meet him a few times over the last couple of years. He was a great gentleman, a fun one to hang around with, and I know they have a large blended family, and there's a lot of sorrow in the Peltola family and the Bethel community as well. So I want to extend my condolences as well to Mary, and we look forward to having her back, but she should be back on her own timeline, her family's timeline as well. So thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize myself for the purposes of an opening statement for 5 minutes. Due to the time constraints we face today with the scheduling on the floor, I'm going to forego my opening remarks and statement, and for the sake of time, allow our first panelists, our witnesses, to give their testimony. Thank you both for being here. We really appreciate it. Yes, I'm going to get to him. So now I recognize Mr. Carbajal for opening statement, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Webster. I too am going to forego my statement and submit it for the record, my opening remarks, but I wanted to also extend my deepest condolences to the Peltola family and our colleague Mary on the passing of her husband Buzzy. Certainly this was tragic, and the family and our colleague are going through a lot, and I just want to extend my deepest condolences and sympathy, and look forward to her coming back when she feels ready to come back. But certainly, anytime we have something like this occur, it reminds us of the work we have and the challenges that we have, and the fact that anything can happen to us or our families at any one time, and the importance that we need to do to cherish them. So again, my condolences to the Peltola family. With that, I'll yield back, Mr. Chair.
So I'd like to welcome our witnesses and thank them for being here today. Today's hearing is noted 2 panelists, and so we begin with the first panel. Briefly, I'd like to take a moment to explain the lighting system that we have. Green means go, yellow means about over, red means stop. That's it. I ask unanimous consent that the witness' full statements be included in the record without objection. Show that ordered. And as your written testimony has been made part of the record, I ask you to limit your remarks to 5 minutes. With that, Rear Admiral Arguin, you are recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairman Webster, Ranking Member Carbajal, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I'm honored to appear before you today to update you on the autonomous and experimental maritime technology within the Marine Transportation System, or MTS. I too would also like to express my deepest condolences to Representative Peltola and her family and friends. Our thoughts and prayers are with her and her family. Our national security and economic prosperity are inextricably linked to a safe, efficient marine transportation system. Across the MTS, innovation is accelerating, creating new opportunities and benefits for the marine industry and the nation. Exciting new innovations, including remote-controlled and autonomous technologies, are being developed to improve the efficiency of various aspects of the marine transportation system that will transform the use of our waterways. Additionally, the needs of the maritime industry are driving future ship propulsion fuel solutions, including liquefied natural gas, methanol, fuel cells, lithium-ion batteries, hydrogen, ammonia, and nuclear energy sources. While the potential benefits of these technologies could be significant, it's imperative to understand the potential risks and implement mitigation strategies to ensure the safety and security of our waterways. This responsibility is shared amongst all marine transportation system stakeholders. As the lead agency for safeguarding the MTS, the Coast Guard is committed to taking a common-sense approach founded on our prevention and response frameworks to evaluate and facilitate the use of emerging technologies to preserve the safe and efficient MTS. We must also ensure that mariners' training programs keep pace with this advancing technology. To achieve this, the service must continue to invest in our ability to attract and retain the talent necessary to meet these challenges in an increasingly complex marine transportation system. The workforce is the heartbeat of our service and is the reason we succeed at our missions. I'm committing to supporting our workforce and field commanders, and we must think differently about how we deliver those services to the marine industry. We are investing in our national centers of expertise to augment and support our field commanders to meet this highly technical workload associated with this technology. We rely heavily on key partnerships throughout all levels of government and industry in the United States and across the globe. Collaboration with the maritime industry is vital as we develop common sense governance standards to rapidly employ these technologies safely and securely. With congressional support, the service is taking full advantage of newly authorized opportunities, such as the At-Sea Recovery Operations Pilot Program for space rocket recovery, to work with early adopters and evaluate new autonomous technologies that will inform the development of new standards. Internationally, the Coast Guard is leading U.S. efforts within the International Maritime Organization to develop standards for the safe, secure, and sustainable operation of maritime autonomous surface ships. The domestic and global focus on developing reimagined standards for these novel technologies will buy down risk inherent in an increasingly interconnected and cyber-dependent supply chain. The service stands ready to support the maritime industry to address these risks to the MTS, to ensure the safety of life at sea, the security of our waterways, the protection of the marine environment, and the efficient movement of goods throughout the nation's waterways around the world. As the Coast Guard continues to evolve its oversight of these emerging technologies, we thank you for your essential and continued support on this important issue. I appreciate the opportunity to testify to you and look forward to your questions.
Thank you. And next we'll have Rear Admiral Weimers, and you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Webster, Ranking Member Carbajal, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for your oversight and strong support of the Coast Guard. Honored to be here today to update you on autonomous and experimental maritime technology. I too would like to send thoughts and prayers out to the Peltola family. Buzzy Peltola, as a father of 2 Coast Guard members, will forever be part of the Coast Guard family. The Coast Guard Deputy Commandant for Operations, Vice Admiral Peter Gaudier, released the Coast Guard's Unmanned Systems Strategic Plan in March. That plan outlines a vision for how the service will respond to and embrace emergence of unmanned technology in the maritime domain. The vision for the future is one where the Coast Guard effectively employs, defends against, and regulates unmanned systems in the maritime environment. We're moving toward a future where the Coast Guard employs unmanned systems in an interconnected data network integrated with artificial intelligence to deliver actionable information to Coast Guard operators. Unmanned systems will be critical to the Coast Guard's ability to meet the challenges of an increasingly dynamic operating environment. Unmanned systems can help find mariners in distress, detect drug and migrant trafficking at sea, monitor illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing in the Indo-Pacific, track icebergs in the North Atlantic, and gain awareness of activity in the Arctic. Currently, the Coast Guard employs 3 types of unmanned aircraft systems. First, long-range systems are part of a joint program with the Customs and Border Protection. Second, medium-ranged are used on our national security cutters. And third, we have domestic-made, legally compliant, short-range systems that are used as force multipliers across the country. The Coast Guard recently deployed unmanned surface capabilities. We deployed contractor-owned, contractor-operated, uncrewed surface assets in the Caribbean Sea and off the coast of Southern California to study the assets' impact on illegal migration and drug trafficking. Additionally, the Coast Guard sees future opportunities to use underwater vehicles and commercial space assets to meet current and future demands. A constellation of unmanned systems may expand our maritime domain awareness, support command and control of our forces, and enhance our mission execution. Finally, the widespread use and low cost of unmanned systems mean these tools are available to those who might seek harm the United States or interrupt the flow of commerce. As a result, the Coast Guard fields capabilities to counter threats from unmanned aircraft systems, also called counter-UAS. The Department of Homeland Security's existing authority that enables the Coast Guard counter-UAS operations expires on September 30th. It's critical that this authority be reauthorized to allow the Coast Guard to continue this mission in defense of the maritime transportation system. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today. Look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you so much for your presence here. Really appreciate it. Thank you for your testimony. It's great. So we'll begin by having questions. I'm going to skip mine, I guess, and call Mr. Carbajal, recognized for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I defer to the ranking member, if that's okay with you.
I'm going to remember.
I'm always trying to suck up to him, so I
don't blame you.
Well, I'm not deferring to anyone. Thanks for coming. So my first set of questions, I'm not sure who's in charge of answering them, but I know a lot of the testimonies focus on autonomous vehicles and so on, but I want to step away a little bit, step back from that a little bit to talk a little bit about remote sensing, data collecting and analytics, and then how you use those, how you use that information so it's actionable. You mentioned, Admiral, creating actionable data so you can go do something with it. So with regards to, as for instance, IUU fishing, how are you working with other agencies like the Navy or anyone else on the use of satellites to track movements of potential targets of IUU fishing, and then using that information for interdiction? And if not, how are you using various technologies to deal with IUU fishing?
So, sir, yes, we're working very closely with the Navy and other partners in order to really expand our maritime domain awareness capability through different systems, especially leveraging those that DoD has at their advantage. We're on a journey to really increase our maritime domain awareness. There's some program of records that the Navy's put that we are working with them to expand Sea Vision, which is a capability that allows for maritime domain awareness, and that we're sharing with different partners around the world to really understand what's out there and be able to address it.
How about on you have an Office of Data and Analytics, is that designed just to, not just to, but is that designed to just collect the data, or do you have the capacity to analyze the data that you're getting for actual use?
So, sir, we're on a beginning stage. That office has been in existence now for a couple of years, and we're going through all the data architecture that we need to put in place before we can really make it actionable for all in hands. We've got some use cases that we're using by pulling data out of our databases and being able to run some analysis on it. But for the most part, that office is working on setting up the data governance for our service.
So as you're moving forward on that, are you also training up the folks who you'll depend upon to analyze that data? And that I would include not just the folks who will put physical eyes on, but any of the algorithms that you'll need to develop to help you sift through the data?
Yeah, the training of our workforce moving out in the future is going to be really important. And we are partnering with others to help us on that journey. We're partnering, for one example, we've got an object detection joint group that we're working with DOD to be able to use their algorithms and partner in those algorithms to be able to use it, for example.
And then maybe for Admiral Arguman, you're responsible for answering this one, but how is all that work then integrated? So in the use of, say, either crewed vehicles or uncrewed vehicles?
Congressman, we hope to take advantage of the work that the Office of Data Analytics will be able to combine to evaluate risk-based regulatory projects. So rather than moving forward with a prescriptive-based regulatory framework, being able to use data-informed risk analyses to help drive where we want to drive our resources and where we need to focus our efforts to reduce challenges with safety. So right now, we've got use cases to take a look at all the information that we capture with respect to the marine transportation system and be able to evaluate where we should be putting our resources to drive safety improvements.
Yeah, so, okay, I'm sorry, that's on the safety side, and I appreciate that. I think my questions maybe are more along the lines of the enforcement interdiction use cases for not just collecting the data, but analyzing the data and then turning that into something that we can use. And then the tools like, artificial intelligence algorithms that, frankly, you need people to do. And we shouldn't forget, tell people that artificial intelligence, the artificial is the software part, the intelligence is the human part. It's not just some random algorithm that drops from the sky and then we get to use it. We actually need people to do this. I'll leave it at that. I do want to follow up, though, and we'll follow up with more specific questions and maybe have you come in for a brief on a few of these issues. I appreciate that. Thanks. Thank you. Yield back.
Do it because I'm not coming back. So I'll do it now. Yeah, I only have a brief.
So Mr. Carwell and I have agreed to ask our questions when we come back after the voting break. Maybe we can squeeze in Mr. Babin. You're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to be able to come back. I'm
Oh, you're
sorry. I
not.
might have,
Now, you've already called on me, Mr.
but you're not ranking member or chairman, so you're out of luck.
Okay, all right. Mr. Carwell, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I should reconsider deferring to the ranking member because he asked one of my questions. So the good news is I'm going to be short, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Arguin, ocean-going vessels routinely carry dangerous explosive cargoes, while U.S. flagged vessels carry cargo for the Department of Defense. Who should be responsible for regulating the cybersecurity of fully autonomous vessels? Is the Coast Guard currently capable of doing that?
Ranking Member Carl, we do have that responsibility, both within the prevention policy responsibilities. We have a cyber underneath our Marine Transportation Security Act authorities. We have the authority to manage and oversee cyber responsibilities. We are currently in the process of issuing a notice of proposed rulemaking that will raise the bar with respect to cyber responsibilities for both vessels and facilities.
Thank you, Admiral. Admiral Arguin, regarding submersibles, Navigation and Vessel Inspection Circular, INVIC number 5-93, states, because of the unique design and operating characteristics, as well as the inherent hazards of underwater operations, an uninspected submersible may be permitted in U.S. passenger operations only if it is designed and constructed to a recognized industry standard. Does the Coast Guard stand by this statement? Is more needed?
Congressman Carball, yes, sir. The requirement for submersible, if you carry one passenger for hire, you need to meet the inspected requirements under subchapter T.
Thank you very much, and sorry, Admiral, the ranking member took my question. So with that, I'll yield back, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Babin, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Admirals, for being here today. I represent both Coast Guard Sector Houston Galveston and Air Station Houston, each housed at Ellington Field in southeast Texas in my district. My questions today are for our Coast Guard panel members, both of you. In the recent 2022 Coast Guard reauthorization, there was a provision, Section 11225, titled Establishment of Unmanned System Program and Autonomous Control and Computer Vision Technology Project. It's a mouthful. The goal of this project is to bring commercial autonomy and computer vision solutions directly to the operational components of the Coast Guard. To use this technology in operational environments for maritime interdiction, search and rescue, and ISR, just to name a few. What is the Coast Guard's plan to execute this technology project in an operational setting through the Coast Guard Research and Development Center? One of you.
So, sir, the R&D Center is obviously doing a lot of research in the world of unmanned systems and improving maritime domain awareness. And we're working hand in hand with them on a number of different activities. We recently just finished the sail drone deployment as one example, where we're trying to use unmanned systems to really understand that capability and how we can best leverage that information to meet our mission. That study that you specifically mentioned is still ongoing, and we're waiting for the results for it.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll go to the next one. Department of Homeland Security's Counter UAS, or CUAS, authority is expiring in September. Does that mean the Coast Guard will not be able to conduct counter UAS operations if it is not reauthorized, or will the Coast Guard authorities allow you to continue CUAS activities?
Our authorities is embedded with the act that brought that on. So when it sunsets, our ability to conduct those operations will also sunset.
Okay, good to know, good to know. I recently heard some great feedback from down in South Texas about the Joint Coast Guard CBP balloon monitoring project, the Argos surveillance balloon, or tethered aerostat, as it's officially called. In addition to supporting our border security and combating illegal immigration, drug trafficking, and smuggling, I'm told that the aerostat is also playing a huge role in deterring illegal fishing in the region. And this sort of partnership is vital, and I encourage you to keep working with agency and military partners to share this innovative technology. For example, to my earlier point, Joint Base Ellington is in my district, also houses the Texas Air National Guard's 147th Attack Wing. They operate MQ-9 Reapers, a UAS platform with state-of-the-art sensor capabilities. I know the CBP has MQ-9s as well, and the Coast Guard has partnered with them in the past to share UAS assets. What has the partnership looked like with the Air National Guard, and what can be done to enhance this shared technology utilization?
So we're working very closely with Customs and Border Protection. We are working jointly on requirements on what we need to have persistent maritime domain awareness out to 200 miles. And CBP's got its sensors, we have our sensors, and we're committed to integrating them and sharing the data and working together in those areas. As far as the MQ-9 Guardians that we fly with a joint program with CBP, we've flown over 3,100 maritime hours since 2018, and we've been able to result in 26,000 kilograms of cocaine being seized specifically because of those assets. It is a very good partnership for us.
Absolutely. Thank you. Proud of you. I yield back.
Mr. Rosenclaw, you recognize for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. It seems one of the core issues that the Coast Guard is facing from a regulatory perspective is this distinction between vessel and vehicle. And a lot rides on that distinction. The Coast Guard has previously promulgated a definition of vessel, but has also said at the same time that that definition does not apply across all types that they might encounter. You've put together the Automated and Autonomous Vessel Policy Council recently. What is the status of that, and is one of the mandates of that council to make that distinction between vessel and vehicle more clear?
Congressman, yes, sir. The Autonomous Policy Coordinating Council, AutoPOCO for short, is really focused on evaluating not only the regulatory framework that exists today to identify gaps where autonomous operations may impact the existing framework, but also looking at training requirements, evaluating that technology to determine how that technology can be brought to bear within the MTS in a safe and secure manner.
So is AutoCoco going to produce recommendations for regulatory changes for the Commandant as well as legal changes for Congress for this new era?
Yes, sir. They are working to evaluate not only with the international community as they evaluate where the international community wants to go, but making recommendations on not only policy changes, but law changes that may be necessary to support the expansion of that technology.
And when can we expect those recommendations?
I don't have a time frame on those recommendations. They're continuing to evaluate not only the international standard, but also the domestic standard. And as those recommendations come forward, we'll move forward with making recommendations for changes.
And who's the flag officer who's responsible for timeline and for efficacy of AutoCoco?
I am.
Okay. Because that was one of the recommendations that came out of the National Academy of Sciences report on this issue, was that there needs to be accountability. And so you are the gentleman who Congress can turn to for these recommendations?
Yes, sir.
Great. Is part of these recommendations going to be about which procurement authority the Coast Guard uses for these? I know there's a whole slew of ones that you could use. Are you going to be talking about how best to procure?
No, sir. So the AutoPOCO team is really focused on the external, so non-Coast Guard related activities with respect to autonomous operations. There's a different division that's working on the internal acquisition and how Coast Guard would use that technology for within Coast Guard operations.
And is there one program officer or flag officer who's in charge of that and is accountable to the Commandant and Congress on deciding whether it's going to be, FARs or non-major acquisition programs, et cetera?
Yes, sir, if I can jump in. Our Assistant Commandant for Acquisition is in charge for all acquisition, including all contracting, which includes the other transactional authority that you're talking about.
Okay, but that's a whole portfolio. Is there one individual at the Coast Guard who's talking just about how to procure for this technology?
So the way we have it set up is I set the requirements for what we need, and I set that capability needs. I then turn it over to the contracting officer within the Assistant Commandant for Acquisition to actually acquire the goods.
That sounds to me like a no. And my concern is that at the commercial sector, and I represent a state, Massachusetts, that has a tremendous ferment of innovation in marine science and technology, they want to know who's going to buy this stuff, and they want to be able to have sit-down conversations about that. Are you the person?
I'm the person.
All right, I'm going to give them your cell phone.
Yes, sir. I'm the one who decides what to buy.
Okay. And then on this point, you all have the Blue Tech Center of Excellence. It's in San Diego. My colleague, Mr. Garamendi, was instrumental in getting that instituted. How many people do you have working there?
So I'll have to get back on the record with you for the exact numbers that we have there.
Does
but
2 sound right?
It's very possible, sir.
And they're civilians.
I'm not sure what the makeup
And what authority do they have?
Sir, they're responsible to inform industry on Coast Guard requirements so that the industry can understand what the Coast Guards are need and what technologies will help us into the future.
So they're like sensors out there in the commercial ecosystem to bring back information to the Coast Guard, but they can't procure, they can't make investments.
They would need to come back to
Yeah.
us to make the.
We're not going to keep pace with innovation unless Blue Tech Center of Excellence has the dedicated funding and the staffing that it needs. And I'd like the Coast Guard to come back with a plan to do that. I'll yield back, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the chair declares that we're going to recess here for some votes, and then we'll come back. Be sure to come back, all the witnesses, both current and the future panel, and then all of the members that can come back, and we'll start again as soon as we're done.
How many Coast Guard
Subcommittee on on Coast Guard and Marine is called to order from the previous recess that we just had, and I recognize myself for 5 minutes to ask questions, and then we'll move to the members' questions. Thank you all for coming back. It's great. Seems like we just left. Admiral Arquin, earlier this year, the Coast Guard supported the search for the Titan submarine that ultimately caused 5 people to perish. The Titan was not registered, wasn't classified or inspected. What processes do you think the Coast Guard need to implement to ensure vessels like the Titan do not evade regulation, particularly when such vessels are carrying passengers?
Chairman Webster, we have initiated Marine Board of Investigation. That's the highest level of investigative body within the Coast Guard to evaluate the evidence in connection with that case. The Marine Board of Investigation will make recommendations to us with respect to either policy changes or regulatory changes that need to be made as a result of that investigation. And so in the meantime, we're evaluating our own existing policies to determine whether or not there are loopholes that can be closed in advance of the finalization of that investigation.
Is there a time frame for that?
We want to make sure the investigations and the investigators have all the time they need to gather the evidence. We want to expedite the completion of that, but I want to make sure that the investigative team has all the time necessary to truly evaluate and pull up all the evidence that would be. If they do determine that there's something that needs to be acted on before the end, they will advise me, and then we can take action on those cases outside of the completion of the investigation.
Admiral Wimmers, the Coast Guard intercepts about 10% of the cocaine flowing into the United States. It is constrained by limited assets covering a large area. How's the Coast Guard using new technologies as a force multiplier to increase maritime domain awareness?
Chairman Webster, indeed, a lot of the conversations we've been having on trying to field unmanned system is specifically to be able to target our resource more effectively in order to get at the threats that are coming into our country.
What factors, if any, are hindering the Coast Guard adoption of new technologies that can improve maritime domain awareness?
Chairman, so just a couple of thoughts on that. One, we talked earlier about managing data. Putting out more unmanned systems collects a lot of data, and we need to be able to manage that data to really turn it into information that we can then use to target threats coming toward us. The other item I would say that would help us is having other transactional authority similar to what DOD has in order to be able to procure new technology in a more effective way.
Admiral Arquin, a recent National Academies of Science report noted that one of the Coast Guard's challenges will be recruiting personnel qualified to oversee new maritime technologies. How will the Coast Guard ensure it has the necessary expertise?
Chairman Webster, to be sure, the challenges associated with increasing technology will put an additional strain on our ability to recruit and ultimately retain the talent necessary to meet that demand. We've got an all hands on deck effort to find that talent, to be competitive, to bring that talent into the service, and then be able to employ them in the most effective way.
Are there any areas where the Coast Guard currently falls short of in regulation expertise for new technologies?
Chairman, I think the regulatory framework is just not flexible and nimble enough to keep pace with emerging technology. we're working through a variety of different design basis agreements, which are essentially an equivalency determination against the current standard to ensure that that technology can be brought to bear and then be able to update the regulations sort of downstream. And so we have the ability to evaluate equivalencies, but the current regulatory framework just does not afford us the opportunity to keep pace based on the current standard.
So there are gaps?
Sir, I wouldn't necessarily call them gaps, because if we identify that there's a challenge, we do have the ability to evaluate alternatives to that standard. Yes, sir.
Okay. Yield back my time, and Mrs. Colton, you're recognized for 5 minutes. Ms. Colton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you both for coming today, for your testimony and for your concern and thoughtfulness over this critically important issue. In my home state of Michigan, water is a way of life, from recreation to supporting the larger Great Lakes economy. The future of carbon neutral fuels and autonomous vessels is of critical importance to the people in Michigan's 3rd Congressional District. As you know, establishing these regulations is the province of the International Maritime Organization, but the Coast Guard, of course, can develop regulations and take their own step to build out processes, even in advance of a global standard. My first question is for Rear Admiral Arguin. Given the speed at which the IMO produces regulations, what is the Coast Guard doing to ensure a more rapid but safe deployment of carbon neutral fuels?
Congresswoman, so we have an autonomous policy coordinating committee that focuses on autonomy. We are also evaluating those new technologies as they are brought to bear. And so in the event that we end up seeing that a particular alternative fuel becomes more mainstream, we'll be able to develop more national regulations. And so but we also need to be mindful that we need to keep pace, or at least maybe be mindful of the International Maritime Organization's efforts, because shipping is global. And so to ensure that we do have alignment with international requirements, we're all on the same journey, trying to figure out how to make sure that these operations and these alternative fuels can be incorporated safely. And so we are in partnership and working directly with IMO to help inform our own domestic standards as well.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about specifically any of the processes or test sites or pilot projects or anything that might be happening right now?
So I'm not aware of any particular test sites or pilot projects other than individual. For example, there are certain ships that are dual-fueled LNG models. They are being built, they're operating today. And so we work through those equivalency determinations to compare them against the existing standard, determine if new requirements need to be put in place based on those risks, and then that establishes a framework for that particular design. As those designs become more mainstream, then we'll be able to essentially put together a national policy that will standardize and set a framework for future development.
Mm-hmm. How would you assess the competitiveness of the United States among other countries developing these technologies?
I don't know that I would be in a position to compare and contrast other countries and sort of from a competitiveness perspective, but I think at least our domestic oversight of those new technologies and being a very deliberate standard to ensure that we have evaluated each of the risks and very confidently understand how those mitigation strategies are going to ensure an equivalent or better operation, I think gives us a bit of an advantage.
Okay. This question of regulation is truly one of the key questions that we are facing right now, moving forward and considering the nimbleness and I believe competitiveness of the United States military. Currently, autonomous vehicles pose something of a loophole in Coast Guard regulations, being classified as recreational vehicles, which are largely uninspected. Can you talk about the plan that we have, even more specifically regulating around this emerging class of vehicles, and either of you please feel free to weigh in on this.
Congressman, so just the discussion of autonomous operations, autonomy has been, and automated systems have been incorporated into shipping for years. The difference is now we're seeing more and more autonomous operations that are replacing what would typically be credentialed mariners or humans on board. And so I think that the challenge is to ensure that the new systems, those computers that are driving operations, have the ability to meet or exceed what we would expect of a crew, and then be mindful that the crew that still remains on board needs to be trained and equipped to be able to continue to operate those vessels in an increasingly complex way.
Rear Admiral Weimer's, do you have anything to add to that?
No, ma'am. My colleague is the expert on regulations.
Waiting for, I see my time is running out, but if you have anything additionally to submit for the record, waiting for a technology to become more mainstream allows for certain gaps in the regulations. Does that give you any safety concerns?
If we're aware of a technology that poses a threat, safety or otherwise, we have the ability through our Captain of the Port authorities to cease that operation. And so if there are perceived gaps or real gaps, we would be able to take some action to prevent that from impacting the marine transportation system.
Thank you.
Young lady yields back. Mr. Vander, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, and thank you for being here today. You know, Southern New Jersey, as you probably know, is my home, and it's my district as well, and it is synonymous with the Coast Guard. The Training Center Cape May is one of the largest bases in the Coast Guard and the sole accession point for the entire enlisted workforce. It is a fundamental part of the culture and part of the economy in South Jersey. In turn, the push for more and more unmanned technology, while potentially beneficial, could greatly alter the functions of our training center. Rear Admiral Arguin and Weimers, will this technology be taught at the Coast Guard Training Center? Will there be a difference in the way we train the recruits as this moves forward, if it moves forward? Either one or both.
So Cape May is our primary accession source. A lot of the technical training that we give is follow-on training in, say, a sea school that we have, which is, technical based on what our people need to actually do the mission activities that we perform. So the training that you're discussing would be performed at those locations.
Okay, so the basic training would be the same, would be pretty much the same as we now have.
We're constantly looking and leveraging technology to improve the delivery of our services, but the session training would predominantly remain the same.
Would there be any change just to, teach people these skills, or again, that would be done at the other location?
So the training specifically is not in either one of our portfolios, and there's a lot of looking going on right now within our service on how we develop our folks. I'm not aware of anything specifically at Cape May, but that is our main session source, and it will remain that a session part.
Technology is good and advancement is good, but there is certainly concerns with safety that may ensue, especially when these vessels, the autonomous vessels such as fishing and private boats, are encountering them and the impacts of marine life. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Congressman, I think we need to be mindful that while maybe in a laboratory, autonomous systems may be able to work properly, operating within the entirety of the complexity and diversity of the marine transportation system is a different, sort of different problem set. And so we need to be deliberate about how we understand how those computer systems will operate and integrate and interact with all of the users of the waterway.
I agree with you. And then, in very plain, I'm a basic guy, so plain English, you don't want to rush into something that ends up being stupid and dangerous. So I think you're right in your priorities there. On top of these concerns, to me, is offshore wind, if it happens, and if it's been delayed along our coast for another 2 years, and it may not happen at all. But if it did happen, will the wind turbines be a difficulty For tourists, we know that already. For marine life and fishermen, and we know that already. But the Coast Guard, I'm interested in your viewpoint on the wind turbines, or is this developing as you hear more about it? Particularly a concern with autonomous vehicles and how they're going to deal with them. I have a lot of fishermen in my district, a lot going on in the water, as you know. And they have concerns without autonomous vehicles, so it particularly concerns me. Two-part questions. The one, the concern with navigation. The second concern is, which has been expressed by some individuals in the military, including the Pentagon, concern with our national security. These things are going to be thousands of them over millions of acres. They're 1,000 feet high, and there's concern about radar. Any thoughts on that from either one or both of you?
Congressman, so I'll try to answer both of your questions maybe at the same time. So first and foremost, Coast Guard's responsible for safety and navigation and preserving the sea shipping lanes that support our $5.4 trillion economy. And so as we work with BOEM and Bessie, specifically BOEM on the leasing areas, we want to make sure that the lease offerings that have a minimal impact or minimize the impact to existing shipping lanes so that we can continue to move ships in a safe manner. With respect to potential challenges with new structures in the ocean, we are evaluating that again with BOEM and Bessie to understand not only the impact that it may have on our existing missions, search and rescue, oil spill response, and others, but understand what the impact of that system might be, even from a cyber perspective. So we're taking a comprehensive review of how that particular footprint changes the dynamics of the marine transportation system.
And I'm glad you're doing that, and I think it needs a good, solid, objective evaluation, regardless of political pressure on either side, just to make sure we stay safe. I'll take my last question, I think, the other viewpoint. How do you think autonomous vehicles could increase safety? Or do you? And do we really need this technology?
Congressman, I think that the opportunity to take advantage of technology, to minimize errors, to understand what that technology can bring in the way of better information, more efficient movement of commerce, is something we should certainly take advantage of, but we need to do that deliberately and make sure that those, as we are transitioning from what we currently have today into something that is a little bit more futuristic, that we understand the inherent and maybe even hidden risks that are.
I think you're right, and I thank you for your good work. And I just want you to know I am always very proud of the Coast Guard and the presence it has, not only along all our coasts and in New Jersey, but particularly in South Jersey. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Ezel, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rear Admiral Argren and Weimers, thank you both for being here today. We really appreciate your staff and all the hard work that everybody puts into it. I'm proud of the work that's taking place in South Mississippi at the Roger Wicker Center for Ocean Enterprise, which includes numerous R&D partnership programs focused on uncrewed maritime systems and the broader blue economy. My district is also home to many startup companies that are rapidly innovating in the unmanned maritime vehicle industry. To ensure their continued success, these companies must have a clear understanding of the legal requirements for lawful operation under the relevant authorities. Rear Admiral Argren, what work is the Coast Guard doing to establish a regulatory framework for unmanned and autonomous systems to operate in the U.S. maritime transportation system?
Congressman, so I've established an autonomous policy coordinating council that is taking a look not only at the gaps or the seams and areas where existing laws and regulations may be impacted by autonomous operations, and then making recommendations to those areas that may need to be improved so that emerging technology can be incorporated. They're also looking at how we train and equip our own inspectors and investigators to make sure that we are aware of that technology and that technology can be brought to bear so that it can be done in a safe and effective way.
Thank you. I understand the International Maritime Organization has set up a working group to consider what a regulatory framework will look like for our autonomous systems. Has the Coast Guard been involved in that?
Yes, sir. The same lead that I have for my Autonomous Policy Coordinating Committee is also a representative to the MASS Working Group, the joint working group that is looking at the same thing, but from an international perspective.
Very good. All right. Admiral Weimers, could you tell us about the experience and expertise of the employees at the Coast Guard Research and Development Center?
Yes, sir, thanks for that question. We've got a fabulous group of folks that work in Groton, Connecticut at the Research and Development Center. They do a lot of different research for us. And as we get into technology and needing to stay up with the latest and greatest, doing the market research, and having that group be able to really work on the integration on how we'd use it is extremely important.
Very good. Has the feedback from the industry taken into considerations the efforts of the entity? How has the feedback given you?
So the R&D Center, they do their reports, they do their experimentation, they work hand in hand and partner with industry to make sure we're understanding the latest of the market has to offer.
Well, you know, the Coast Guard has been a part of my life on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and we fully support you, want to help you, and be a part of all your success. So thank you very much for being here today. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. So, I'd like to thank the witnesses for coming today and for your testimony, but you can be excused if you want to be. And yeah. I'd like to welcome our second panel of witnesses and ask them to take their seats. Okay, great to see you. Our second panel today consists of industry experts leading the development of autonomous and experimental maritime technologies and representatives of mariners that will be operating these technologies. Their insights will be vital to developing an appropriate regulatory framework to ensure safe operation of these technologies in our maritime transportation system. Thank you all for being here today. Really appreciate it. Take a moment to explain our lighting system, which I've already explained. G, green. Greens go, yellows slow up, red stop. That's it. I ask unanimous consent that the witnesses' full statements of the second panel also be included in the record without objection. So that ordered. As your written testimony has been made part of the record, the subcommittee asks you to limit your oral remarks to 5 minutes. With that, is it Mr. Privis? Pribble, I'm sorry. Whoops.
Pribble, yes.
Where I got that?
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Pribble, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman Webster, Ranking Member Schulten, and members of this subcommittee, I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to testify about the National Academy's consensus study report on leveraging unmanned systems for Coast Guard missions, a strategic imperative on which I served as a committee member. This subcommittee also invited me to offer my comments on notable developments in the Coast Guard's use and regulation of maritime technologies since that report's publication in 2020. My testimony today is as a committee member of that report. Briefly, Congress requested a study of the Coast Guard's existing and prospective use of unmanned systems to fulfill its many critical missions. Through the course of that study, the committee recognized the value that such technologies could offer the Coast Guard. The committee made 5 recommendations related to unmanned systems. First was to issue a high-level strategy. Second was to designate a senior champion. Third was to stand up a program office. Fourth was to expand and normalize experimentation. And fifth was to get a fix on funding needs. To the study committee's understanding, and as discussed in greater detail in my written testimony, several of those recommendations have been addressed by the Coast Guard. The study committee also recognized the complex policy and legal questions raised with such technologies, in particular, as the Coast Guard is not only a potential user, but also a regulator of unmanned systems. Generally, statutes, regulations, and conventions did not contemplate vessels without humans on board when they were drafted. Thus, traditional legal principles are being challenged. However, there is a great deal of ongoing effort to understand how these technologies fit in legal frameworks as they exist now, which was also part of the work conducted by the study committee. Thank you again, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Webster, Ranking Member Schulten, and other members for inviting me to speak on this important topic of innovation in the maritime space and specifically marine autonomous technology. So yesterday, my wife and I navigated to one of the only 2 memorials on the National Mall that's dedicated to a technology innovator. Just south of the Lincoln Memorial is a beautiful Milford granite 20-foot edifice dedicated by President Coolidge and the Crown Prince of Sweden in full regalia in 1926. And it honors a Mr. John Erickson, and he, like me, was a marine engineer. And in large, bold deco font, it says, "He invented the screw propeller." And above him are towering figures representing our national belief in adventure, labor, and vision. Now, John Erickson was indeed Swedish, and with his propeller design, he attempted to gain traction in Europe. And in the 1830s, he landed a pilot program with a marquee customer of that era, the British Royal Navy, who then passed on it because they comfortably believed in the continuing dominance of sailing vessels. So then in 1839, a bold and connected citizen of the United States invited John to our nation and gained funding to build the U.S. Navy test vessel Princeton, which proved capabilities that began a major transformation of the world's fleets, along with the world order. Within 20 years, 70 years after we penned our Constitution, the United States had the world's second largest merchant marine, just behind Britain. And today, 180 years later, it is all still moving by the screw propeller. And so this story is very important to me because it's a clear example of our young country and the very lean federal government at that time investing with focus in disruptive innovation to build national value. And today, just like then, the marine industry does everything on the water-covered surface of our planet, operating the largest machines made by humankind and connecting the world with trade. And licensed mariners, some of the best trained professionals of any industrial space, maintain these powerful machines and pilot them in the Earth's most dynamic and forceful environment. So what is autonomous technology? It is the innate technical progression after 20th century automation. Yet the power and capability of it is an exponential step. Where automation is a singular process, like a if this, then that, autonomy is a comprehensive compute engine that prioritizes sensor data, weighs decisions to complete larger complex processes like a full voyage. So that's valuable because the industry and its mariners today are handicapped by the continued use of last century's technology and methods, resulting in accident rates that eclipse other comparable vehicle industries. As well, we have dismal on-time arrival rates and unoptimized operation of the world's cargo fleet that emits 3% of humanity's annual greenhouse gas. So autonomy will transform fleet operations and bring forward the reliability, productivity, and precision of advanced robotics, empowering mariners to do more, do it better and safer, with less effort and less cost. So today, autonomy systems are being deployed by early adopters, both commercial and for national security. Task-driven workboats use it for open water surveying and data collection, as well as heavy, dangerous work like oil spill response and domain awareness. And it's beginning to be trialed in larger vessels that move cargo and people. So maritime is a major contributor to our nation's economy, accounting for 1.9% of our GDP and 2.3 million jobs. But the United States no longer holds a leading nor an influential position, and the global presence of the U.S. flag fleet is continually shrinking. In global cargo fleet ownership value, the U.S. now ranks number 14, well below China at number 1. So autonomy is an emerging space, but it's advancing quickly, and other determined nations that value its potential are investing heavily to take that commanding position. The United States should not pass on this opportunity. We should focus our national lens on this technical field, or we are handing the keys of the seas to others and further risk our position as a global super economy-driven superpower. We must do the things today to shape where we want to be in the decades ahead. Thank you for this opportunity, and I'm here at your service to answer any questions.
Gentleman yields back. Now, Mr. Leahy, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'll try to hold my notes here. Oh, need my glasses, beg your pardon. I'm on a starkly different topic here, ladies and gentlemen. But good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chairman, distinguished members of the committee. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to address all of you today. My name is Patrick Leahy. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Triton Submarines. I started Triton Submarines 17 years ago with the sole objective of creating the most advanced human-occupied vehicles, HOVs, in the world today that would allow our clients, along with their friends, family members, and guests, to safely explore the wonder and beauty of the deep sea. Every sub built by Triton is still in class and in service, certified to the original depth, and in the care and control of a client, we enjoy a mutually beneficial relationship. Every Triton is certified and accredited by an independent third-party classification society, which should be a requirement for all human-occupied vehicles. Triton created the deepest diving sub in the world today, the Triton 36002, which is the only classed and certified HOV with an unlimited diving depth. Triton delivered this revolutionary new sub in 2018, and in addition to completing dives to the deepest point in each of the world's 5 oceans during the historic and unprecedented 5 Deeps expedition, this extraordinary machine has made 16 dives to full ocean depth, the Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench, and more than 100 dives to the Hadal Zone, an area of the ocean that lies between 20,000 and 36,000 feet. I had the privilege of making 5 dives in the Mariana Trench, including the certification dive in 2019 with the DNV Surveyor, which also turned into the deepest ever salvage at 35,865 feet. Classed and certified human-occupied vehicles still have a perfect track record of safety spanning more than 50 years. During this time, tens of millions of people have enjoyed the wonderfully sublime experience of diving in the comfort and safety of an HOV without a single fatality. The Ocean Gate sub was an aberration, a mistake, and this experimental craft, which was not subjected to any type of peer review, should never have carried human beings. The message is the Ocean Gate tragedy was entirely avoidable and should have never happened. There's no place in the human-occupied exploration of the deep sea for experimental subs. Certification, accreditation, and independent classification society compliance is essential to avoiding a repeat of the Ocean Gate tragedy. HOVs must be independently peer-reviewed and validated to ensure they're safe for human occupancy. Any craft carrying human cargo should be required to meet or exceed the high bar of certification, no exceptions. In addition to the tragic loss of life caused by the Ocean Gate disaster is the fear it has indirectly created or reinforced about subs and the collateral damage it has done to legitimate builders of classed HOVs in our small industry like Triton and so many others. We willingly and enthusiastically embrace the need and importance of the accreditation process, which is necessarily arduous, thorough, time-consuming, and expensive, but results in a machine that's fit for purpose and safe for people to use within the limits stipulated by the certification agencies and the manufacturer. Continued human-occupied exploration of the deep sea is essential to furthering our knowledge and understanding of these largely unexplored areas of our own planet. HOVs, or human-occupied vehicles, are magical machines that I've had the privilege to work with for more than 40 years. I've devoted my professional life to the development and the safe operation of these vehicles. Classed and certified HOVs safely transport you to the most fascinating place on our planet and help us to better understand and appreciate and begin to care about the importance of the ocean's health and well-being and the undeniable connection it has to our own continued survival. We will only protect what we love, and properly designed and engineered subs allow you to connect viscerally and emotionally to a place most people never get the privilege and opportunity to visit, but I can assure you that if you ever have a dive in a human-occupied vehicle, it will change your perception of the ocean forever. The experience will leave an indelible impression on you, just as it did to me more than 40 years ago. Just make sure the craft you're diving in is certified. The deep ocean is no place for compromise. Thank you.
Gentleman yields. Mr. Spain, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, and members of the committee, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to testify for American Maritime Officers, Marine Engineers Beneficial Association, Masters, Mates, and Pilots, and the Seafarers International Union here today. I hope everyone will take the time to read my written testimony, which is quite technical. I would like to share with you my 30 years of experience as a U.S. seafarer in the international maritime industry. I'm Captain Christian Spain, and I'm proudly to represent the 3,400 officers at American Maritime Officers as their Vice President of Government Relations. I've been working for AMO in Washington for about a decade, and prior to that, I sailed aboard AMO contracted vessels as a master and deck officer for nearly 20 years. Maritime Autonomous Surface Ships, or MASS, are called by different names, such as autonomous vessels, drone vessels, or unmanned surface ships. I'll just refer to them as MASS. For the safety of all seafarers, MASS must adhere to the existing maritime regulations, such as the International Regulations for the Prevention of Collisions at Sea, often referred to in the maritime industry as coal regs or the rules of the road. Instituting separate parallel regulations for MASS should be given little consideration. For instance, vessels have a duty to render assistance by providing manpower, equipment, and or shelter to survivors in the event of a maritime emergency. This duty goes back a millennium and cannot be shirked because it's inconvenient for innovative technology. MASS must be able to use both spoken and written language as safe communication. It is vital for the safety of the seafarers, passengers, and the marine environment, but also for the efficiency of daily tasks and the ship's integrity. Masts, like traditional vessels, should be equipped with VHF radios to exchange information with nearby vessels, ports, and maritime authorities. This includes communication for collision avoidance, navigation updates, and emergency situations as required by current domestic and international maritime laws and regulation. The upfront cost of retrofitting existing vessels or purchasing new autonomous ships are substantial. Ship owners have reservations about making such significant investments, especially if the benefits are not immediately realized. While proponents of MASS argue that the autonomous vessels can reduce OpEx over time, ship owners worry about the ongoing expense related to maintenance, software updates, and security measures, cybersecurity measures. Ships generally are only making money for an owner when they are underway. Without seafarers aboard, preventive maintenance would have to be exceptionally well-tailored and timed to occur in geographically advantageous areas to see cost savings over the life of a vessel based on labor arbitrage. When considering unplanned maintenance and repair, it would seem very unlikely to save money when there are no seafarers aboard your vessel to repair it. Use of masts will not eliminate or prevent the risk of maritime accidents, including collisions, elisions, and groundings, which can lead to oil spills and significant environmental damage. The absence of onboard seafarers may hinder the rapid response to oil spills, exacerbating the environmental impact. MARPOL and EventID are complementary and critical instruments for regulating the discharge of pollutants from vessels, including oil spills. Crew members must be trained to take immediate steps to minimize spillage, such as deploying oil spill containment equipment and the regularly drilling in the use of such equipment so that crew members are well-versed in emergency procedures. Seafarers play a pivotal role in mitigating the environmental impact of oil spills from vessels. Crew members on board are integral to the effective implementation of MARPOL and EventID regulations in response to oil spills. Digitization in the maritime sector allows the further automation of some functions and better control of processes as a whole. It can enable an increased use of remote control technology. Many of these technologies could be used to the benefit of seafarers and improve the safety conditions while providing more efficient operations. Other than in niche markets, this technology should be used as a tool and not a complete replacement for seafarers. In closing, I want to emphasize that there is a substantial difference between commercial international shipping and the mission of the U.S. Coast Guard and other government agencies. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the committee for your attention on this pivotal matter.
Gentleman yields back. Now we'll turn our attention to the questions for the panel. I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Pribble, in your opinion, where can the Coast Guard immediately leverage existing commercial unmanned technologies to support its missions?
We looked at this in the report, and we laid forth what we felt were the areas, the mission areas, where the use of unmanned systems could provide the most immediate value. I think that it's a combination of some that were mentioned on the first panel, things like search and rescue and pollution response. The issue in terms of the commercial access to that we found in the report was the acquisition process, that it wasn't moving quickly enough, that they didn't have the mechanisms in place to avail themselves of that technology. And in the United States, most of this technology is being developed on the commercial side. So we had made some recommendations related to that. And I think if you look in combination with the recommendations as to the areas of missions that are of value, and then see if they can make improvements as to the acquisition side, I think that's where they would add the most value.
Mr. Johnson, what are the biggest regulatory hurdles that you've encountered in development of systems built by your company?
Yes, thank you for the question, Chairman. We have not seen many regulatory hurdles. We are mariners. I came from the marine industry. The reason for what we're building is because of challenges that I saw in my work up in Alaska and in the salvage industry as well, where we dealt with many marine accidents. And so we operate within the maritime domain, and from the beginning have built our technology to work within the current regulatory structure. So we are a technology company, and then we support our customers, operators, to ensure that they gain the approval of U.S. Coast Guard, Danish Maritime Authority, and other places. Plus, we work closely with the class societies as well, who have worked to certify our technology and also type approve it to be able to be installed across fleets.
Mr. Leahy, if OceanGate had submitted submitted the Titan to appropriate regulatory oversight, including a class inspection, what do you think would have been the likely result?
Thank you for the question. I think the end result of them subjecting that vehicle to the accreditation process is it would have failed miserably. It was a craft that would have never been able to meet the high bar of certification.
Mr. Spain, how will you role as a mariner change aboard vessels with increased automated capabilities?
I could see the need for upskilling depending on what the systems are, the systems being installed. There's so many different systems out there in development right now. I wouldn't comment other than to say that.
Well, what needs to be done to ensure that mariners are adequately trained on these new in these new technologies?
Well, each system is different and requires unique training, I believe, at least as its current in its current iteration. I would say that I believe going forward, we'll see different sectors develop different training needs.
Thank you very much. All right, I know you may think this is a small group, but it's a powerful group. It's an awesome group of people,
Small but mighty.
and we're ready to change the world. So anyway, you just stay with us. We're gonna do it. So anyway, I would recognize Ms. Well, you're the kind of the ranking member
Okay, well,
now.
I'd be happy to, but I defer to you as well if you'd like. Okay. Thank you all so much for your critically important testimony today. I've got a number of different questions, so bear with me. Mr. Johnson, in your testimony, you talk about how the U.S. lags in the development of new tech behind other countries like China. What can we be doing now in the U.S. to position us as a leader in maritime technology and innovation?
Yeah, thank you for the question. We listened this morning to the testimony of the admirals and the questions around that, and a lot of it was around regulation and from that standpoint. And so I look at our nation kind of from two hands. You have the Hamiltonian, which was on developmentalism, about being the coach and using the government to coach industry and bring it forward. And you have the Jeffersonian, which was about being the umpire, and controlling. And so I think we've been doing really well on the umpiring side of it and the refereeing of it. And I think as government, we need to be doing much more on the coaching and promotion of innovation to continue to build our GDP. Marine autonomous technology is a significant opportunity. The way that I look at it is similar to what we did and what the government did with, Congress did, with the internet going back to 1991 with the Supercomputing Act. That act, which then also put $600 million out there, sparked that whole development. And that whole industry now puts $2.5 trillion into our GDP. And so that was a really good investment. And so from our side, or looking at autonomous technology, I see the scale of this space. You know, our industry moves, I think it's 17 trillion of world trade, and it's a great place to be on the leading edge of technology for the future ahead.
Thank you. That's incredibly helpful. Staying on this, but switching gears a little bit, this question is for Mr. Spain. I'd like you to expound a little bit on the point in your testimony regarding liability. And currently, liability rests with the master. On a fully autonomous vessel, who would be responsible for a maritime casualty?
Thank you, Congresswoman. That's the question and why I put it in the testimony. I do a lot of work at the IMO. I've been working there for 10 years, and I've been involved with the MASS discussions for the last 8. This has not been worked out. The criminal liability part is a real stickler there, because if you don't have jurisdiction over the person, then where are you? Some people have suggested that if a vessel is operating in your space, such as the U.S., if you want to have jurisdiction over them, then you've got to ensure that the remote operations center is within your jurisdiction in the U.S. There is a tradition in our industry, at least with regard to flagging vessels out, or flagging vessels in flags of convenience in order to skirt jurisdictions for other reasons. And I foresee this as being one of the biggest issues, determining how this lays out, who's responsible, and who somebody could put hands on, really. Thank you.
It is indeed an important question, not only in maritime vessels, but in autonomous vehicles as well. We're grappling with it across industries. What guides do you look to make these decisions, or what do you think that we can look to come to some sort of conclusion here?
I'm no expert on this. Initially, I would have thought, before being involved with this, that I would go with the owner. But the issue is that if you have a manufacturer of a unit and say it's got 15 different safety options and 5 of them are required, and somebody buys one with 6, and then you find after an accident that, hey, if you'd had another 6 of these options, that this likely wouldn't have happened, well, is it the owner's responsibility? Probably. But if that's not the issue, and the issue is about the actual unit and which portion of it fails to operate, that is probably on the manufacturer.
Thank you. I'll yield back at this point.
Tele yields back. Mr. Hizell, you're recognized.
That was quick.
Yeah. Well, you've been part of a team. It's a very powerful team, and now it's gotten even more powerful. So you're welcome aboard.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Prebill, common spelling. I'm interested to learn more about your role on the study committee that I helped author the TRB report and the advancement in technologies and the program since then. Can you expand on what the Coast Guard can do to develop autonomous maritime system programs as rapidly as the Navy and the Marine Corps?
Yes, thank you for the question. And the report itself is 3 years old now. So part of what I was invited to do today was to give our understanding of where we'd seen the progression with that. Certainly, the U.S. Navy is leading in this space, especially in the U.S. Very forward-leaning in the use of the technology. My understanding is that the Coast Guard has been involved in joint exercises with the Navy, trying to understand how the Navy is using that technology and see how it could be implemented into the Coast Guard missions. We didn't get a full briefing from the Coast Guard on exactly how that's playing out, but that's our understanding. The other issue, again, is different acquisition streams, so that Navy and Special Forces and other DoD services and branches, they have different acquisition opportunities that the Coast Guard is not able to avail themselves of. So in terms of what the Coast Guard can be doing, we had listed a number of different acquisition streams and processes. So I would say just to continue to evaluate those opportunities. And again, in the U.S., it's still going to continue to come from the commercial sector, is the academics sector as well. You know, Southern Mississippi obviously doing quite a bit down there with NOAA and others. So continuing to leverage those opportunities from the commercial and academic sectors.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Johnson, I'd like to talk more about the current market. How do you compare the Coast Guard and the Navy as a customer in this market? Do you believe the Coast Guard has made the necessary investments in their force structure to support unmanned maritime systems?
So, yeah, thank you for the question, sir. The Coast Guard has made some investments, and we've been been able to serve them with technology as well. What we would like to see is innovation moving quickly, and today a lot of the Coast Guard work and innovation stays in the lab. When it comes to comprehensive technology like this, you got to get it out of the lab and get it out into its operating domain. So just like we do internally, we have a test fleet with captains on staff, and so daily we're running that technology, like you see with autonomous car companies as well. And so we encourage the Coast Guard to request, obtain the budget to get the systems out into operations and go out with a real plan on what they're trying to achieve with it as well, not just trialing technology.
Thank you. Some companies in my district tell me about their limited resources to focus on business development activities. In your opinion, what could the Coast Guard do to be more effective and a probable customer for companies such as yours and the ones that have operations in my district?
Yes, so thank you for the question. The Coast Guard, it has 11 missions. You know, they do a lot with a relatively small budget. Plus, they have probably one of the most diverse missions, responsibilities of missions across the government. We feel that, as I said, that if we could help them in being able to help craft the applications, and you know, we build autonomous technology that enables increased productivity and efficiency as well as precision of operation of vessels. We also build computer vision systems as well. And so we needed that to enable our technology to see more and understand a domain. But we know that like within the Coast Guard's roles and responsibilities, they also need to be able to see more and have more domain awareness. So our team is regularly working to interface with the Coast Guard, and I guess the more time we can get with them, the better.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'm about out of time, so I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Rosenkopf, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Johnson, your testimony, written testimony was striking. The word that was coming to mind as I read it was leapfrogging, in the sense that it seemed like in the 19th and 20th centuries, the United States built up an advantage. Navy and Merchant Marine has since lost it, at least in the Merchant Marine, increasingly maybe even in the Navy, and that autonomy can be one way to regain that edge. And then you've talked about coaching as a way to get there. And so I want to build on previous questions from both sides of the aisle. It sounds like you want the Coast Guard to be better at procurement practices and how they interface with the private sector. Is that correct?
Yes, and then I'm just also speaking to leadership as a whole within the nation and in a business environment to really set goals around innovation, around the value that it can bring, that future value.
I hear that, but it is helpful for us here in Congress to have more specific things. I mean, I've been hearing testimony for 3 years from entrepreneurs, and I've never had somebody say that they are fine with all the regulations that exist. I mean, there's really nothing that you would want to change around MARAD or...
It's a good question. We work to navigate it, but of course, speed is our friend, and in fact, we're working with one U.S. flag company now that has our technology on a harbor tug, and we've been going through the approval process with the Coast Guard, and that's a year and a half into it now. And so if there's a way to speed those approvals up, but at the same time, we also want to ensure that this technology is safely deployed. We understand when there is an accident, maybe in some part of a sector that might be close to us, maybe not even us, it could also impact us.
Do you have an opinion about the method of procurement that the Coast Guard uses, the Federal Acquisition Regulation, their RDT&E program? Is there anyone that's been best to work with and that should be built upon?
Somebody on my team will, for sure.
Okay.
I'm not close enough to be able to answer that question.
You mentioned in your written testimony also digital infrastructure and the importance of investing in that alongside the Marine Highways program that we've had over the last decade. Can you expound upon that? What does digital infrastructure for MASS look like?
So actually, it kind of starts at the Coast Guard level when you look at the GAO's review of the Coast Guard and how they're implementing or executing their work. Almost all the things where they point out gaps is around data and being able to do their inspections better with data and be able to track the industry better with data. But from a digital infrastructure, this is the 21st century. You know, the 20th century, as I mentioned, is automation, but a lot of separate systems working together. The digital infrastructure centralizes and brings a leap in productivity and value. You see it, say, like in an Amazon warehouse. You know, an example I would just give you real quick is Amazon back in 2014, 2015, the quickest they could get their click to ship with their manual processes was 60 to 75 minutes. Then they brought in the Kiva robots into their warehouses, connected it digitally from their logistics system to the robot fleets, and were able to get it down to 15 minutes to click and ship. And of course, now you see what they do for our economy.
Switching gears, Mr. Preibel, do you think that the coal reg should be modified to accommodate MASS?
It's an interesting question, and it's something that has been ongoing in legal and academic circles for several years now. And I think what's interesting and what's happened since the report's publication in 2020, where we had explained some of these issues with the coal regs and one of the appendix, we had laid out what we thought could be issues because the Coast Guard, as a user of the...
We have 45 seconds, so just give me the quick answer.
It's being evaluated at the IMO.
Could they have would they, because right now there's a duty to render care, as Mr. Spain laid out in his written testimony. Could they fulfill that duty?
There are interpretations that say that there could be a way by which that could be successfully rendered, even remotely, but that's all legal, and the interpretations of it are varied. The issue, though, with the coal regs that I want to point out was that as a user, the Coast Guard has said that the coal regs can be complied with without anyone on board or with remote operations by promulgation of the Naval Commander's Handbook. And in that publication, that's clearly made as a position of DOD's Navy.
Because there could be a human in the loop even remotely to step in.
That's the Naval Commander. That's been published since 2020, and that's the interpretation there. So this is the bottom line is these are all subject to interpretation right now.
Yield back.
Gentleman yields back. That pretty much concludes where we're going. And again, thank you for the people that came, testified, very informative, and we really appreciate it. I ask unanimous consent that the record of today's hearing remain open until such time as our witnesses have provided answers to any questions that may be submitted to them in writing without objection, so that ordered. I also ask unanimous consent that the record remain open for 15 days for any additional comments and information submitted by the members or witnesses to be included in today's, the record of today's hearing. And without that, this powerful subcommittee is adjourned.